It's the middle of a brutal winter, long before central heating and smart thermostats made comfort feel automatic. Fuel is scarce, fires must last, and every decision inside the home carries consequences. You would expect the advice from that era to be simple: seal every crack, trap every ounce of warmth, and never let the cold inside. Yet buried in old European household guides and passed quietly through generations is a rule that seems to defy common sense. Open the windows to stay warm. At first glance, it sounds like a mistake that no experienced survivor would make. Letting freezing air into a heated space feels like throwing away hard-earned heat. But people who lived through winters without modern safety nets didn't survive by following comforting ideas. They survived by following what worked, even when it contradicted instinct. What they understood, and what many have forgotten, is that warmth is not just about temperature. It is about conditions. A sealed house can feel colder than an airy one. A room filled with heat can still drain energy faster than it should. And the difference often comes down to something invisible but powerful: moisture. In this guide, we are going to break down the winter venting rule not as folklore, but as a survival-tested system grounded in physics, architecture, and lived experience. You will see why tightly sealed spaces can betray you, how dampness quietly steals heat, and why a short, controlled burst of fresh air can make your home warmer, safer, and more efficient. This is not theory. This is a method refined over generations that still applies today. Before modern insulation and synthetic barriers, homes were built with materials that interacted with the environment. Stone, brick, timber, and plaster did not trap air in the same way modern materials do. They allowed moisture to pass through slowly, keeping structures balanced when managed correctly. But even then, people recognized a serious threat. When moisture built up inside a home, everything changed. Walls, floors, and furniture began to absorb that moisture, and once they did, they behaved differently under heat. A damp surface draws warmth away from the air much faster than a dry one. This is something anyone can feel immediately. A wet piece of fabric feels colder than a dry one, even in the same room. The temperature has not changed, but the rate at which heat is being pulled away from your body has increased. Same principle applies to a building. When moisture accumulates indoors, from cooking, washing, or simply breathing, it does not disappear. Without ventilation, it settles into the structure itself. Now, instead of heating air, your fire or heater is constantly fighting against damp materials that absorb and dissipate heat. This creates a situation where a house can feel perpetually cold despite continuous heating. The warmth is there, but it is being drained faster than it can stabilize. Early builders and households understood this not through equations, but through experience. A dry home stayed warm. A damp one demanded constant fuel. Opening windows for a short period was their solution. It was not about cooling the space, but about removing the moisture before it could settle deeper into the structure. To understand why this works, it helps to look at the basic behavior of air under heat. Not all air responds the same way when warmed. Dry air heats quickly and holds warmth efficiently. Moist air, on the other hand, requires more energy to reach the same temperature. Water vapor in the air acts like a burden. It increases the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature and slows down the process. This means that a humid indoor environment forces your heating system to work harder for the same result. In winter, this creates a paradox. The cold air outside feels harsh and biting, often associated with dampness. But in reality, cold air holds very little moisture. When that cold air enters a home and is heated, it becomes extremely dry. This transformation is the key. By bringing in cold, dry air and then warming it, you are effectively resetting the indoor environment. The heavy, moisture-laden air is replaced with lighter air that heats quickly and stays warm longer. The important detail is timing. If this exchange happens quickly, the structure of the home, its walls, floors, and furniture, retains most of its stored heat. Only the air is replaced. Once the windows close, that stored heat rapidly warms the new dry air. What feels like a loss of warmth is actually a strategic reset that makes heating more efficient in the minutes that follow. Across parts of Europe, particularly in colder regions, this practice became standardized. Rather than leaving windows slightly open for long periods, people developed a more effective method. Windows would be opened fully for a short burst, often just a few minutes. This created a strong airflow that replaced the indoor air quickly, and everything would be closed again, restoring the sealed environment. The difference between this method and leaving a window cracked open is critical. A partially open window allows a slow, continuous exchange of air that gradually cools the structure of the building. Over time, walls and furniture lose their stored heat, making the space harder to warm again. A short, intense ventilation period avoids this problem. The exchange happens quickly enough that the structure does not cool significantly. Instead, it acts as a reservoir of warmth that immediately begins reheating the fresh air once the windows are closed. This approach is efficient because it targets the real issue, its moisture, without sacrificing the thermal stability of the home. It is a precise action rather than a passive habit. For those who rely on wood or coal fires, the importance of ventilation becomes even clearer. A fire is not just a source of heat. It is a system that depends on airflow to function correctly. When a home is sealed too tightly, the fire struggles to draw in enough oxygen. This weakens combustion, reducing heat output and increasing smoke. In extreme cases, it can even reverse the airflow in a chimney, pushing dangerous gases back into the living space. Historically, people noticed that introducing a small amount of fresh air improved how a fire burned. Opening a window briefly or creating a controlled draft helps stabilize the system. The fire burned hotter, cleaner, and more efficiently. This improvement often compensated for any temporary loss of heat from the open window. Less fuel was needed, and the space became safer to inhabit. It was a practical adjustment rooted in observation rather than theory. The lesson is straightforward. Heat sources do not operate in isolation. They depend on the environment around them. Managing airflow is part of managing heat. In the pursuit of energy efficiency, modern construction has focused heavily on sealing buildings as tightly as possible. Insulation has improved, gaps have been eliminated, and air exchange has been minimized. While this reduces heat loss in theory, it introduces a new problem. Moisture generated inside the home becomes trapped. Without natural ventilation, it accumulates over time, leading to damp conditions within walls and hidden spaces. This not only affects comfort, but also the integrity of the building. Prolonged moisture can lead to mold growth, material degradation, and health issues for occupants. What was intended as an efficiency measure can become a long-term liability. Recent studies comparing mechanical ventilation systems with simple window-based ventilation have shown that controlled natural airflow can be highly effective at reducing indoor humidity. In some cases, it performs as well as or better than more complex systems, especially when used correctly. This suggests that older practices were not primitive solutions waiting to be replaced. They were refined responses to real conditions, developed through necessity and tested over time. The enduring value of the winter venting rule lies in its simplicity and effectiveness. It does not require specialized equipment or advanced knowledge. It only requires an understanding of when and how to act. Ventilation, when done correctly, removes the conditions that make a home feel cold despite heating. It prevents moisture from turning walls into heat sinks. It allows heating systems to operate efficiently rather than constantly compensating for hidden losses. The key is intention. Opening a window randomly or leaving it open too long can work against you. But a short, deliberate exchange of air can reset the entire environment. This is the kind of knowledge that survives because it works under pressure. It does not depend on ideal conditions or modern infrastructure. It adapts to different settings and remains effective across generations. The next time a room feels colder than it should, resist the urge to immediately increase the heat. Consider what might be happening beneath the surface. Think about the air you are breathing and the condition of the space around you. A brief, controlled opening of a window may do more than any adjustment to a thermostat. It can restore balance, improve efficiency, and make the environment more livable in ways that are not immediately obvious. If you value practical knowledge rooted in history and proven by experience, this is exactly the kind of insight worth keeping. These are not relics of the past. They are tools that remain relevant in the present. Subscribe to Intelligent Survival for more deep dives into the strategies that helped people endure the harshest conditions. Share this with someone who is tired of fighting the cold without understanding it. And remember, sometimes the smartest survival move is the one that seems counterintuitive at first glance.